I'm Kevin Lankus, and you stumbled onto Let's Do Some Effing Good, and today we're going to talk about headlines and why they're terrible. Even after the whole clickbait phenomenon has kind of died down quite a bit. How can things be worse after clickbait? Let's talk about it. On a quick related note, I have a fun new series of short videos coming at you that I'm calling Headline Fixes. It's going to be a lot of fun and a super informative take on responsible journalism and our information infrastructure. So make sure to like and subscribe so you can get in on that with me. But right now, let's talk about what's happening with headlines and why, and what we might be able to do about it. Because we are inundated around the clock with completely misrepresentative headlines. Even when the body of an article or a news segment goes on to cover nuance and explain complex issues or even totally contradict the outrageous simplicity of the headline is still what people focus on, and it's still where the vast majority of people will stop. Research shows us that 75% of the time, social media users share online articles without even clicking through and reading them themselves. The very same study found that when a user closely aligned with the political lean of the headline, they were even more likely to share it without reading beyond the headline at all. Headlines are extremely important because oftentimes they're all people are going to see. If they don't accurately represent the body of the story, which oftentimes they don't at all, then readers are not going to come away with any nuance or understanding because they didn't actually read the piece. This whole thing started out when independent actors found out how profitable the ad revenue model of digital media could be, and then the bigger outlets started following suit. Clickbait was everywhere for a really long time, and I probably don't have to tell you that because you know which Harry Potter, Hufflepuff, house of whatever you'd be if you were a monkey with ice cream legs. And that was because making money with ads was kind of an unregulated chaos machine for a while. And it did kind of self-regulate after a bit, but what's happening now is that the situation has really cemented into a stable pattern. And this pattern is creating siloed chambers of misinformation, and it's stopping us from having productive conversations about the world around us. And you can learn all about the causes of this in the video I did recently about how the ad revenue model of media destroyed our information infrastructure. But right now, we have to reckon with the fact that headlines are crafted intentionally in a certain way to draw in as many eyeballs as humanly possible. Since clickbait is not as prominent due to reader fatigue and also content moderation efforts from Google's search algorithm, the tactics have changed a bit. Fear-mongering is still a big draw though, as is outrage bait. A large portion of headlines have evolved into a sort of comedy of the absurd kind of style, and they've drawn an enormous backlash from media professionals like myself. And I don't normally do this, and I try really hard to take myself out of the information on this channel, including my own personal experience and my ego and my inherent biases, and I simply stick to the evidence. But I do feel like in this case, my 15 years of working in digital media and tirelessly crafting headlines and workshopping headlines, it all gives me a pretty great window into how this whole thing has evolved. A lot of us have been pointing out this comedy of the absurd headline issue for a long time. And what do I mean exactly when I say this? Well, for whatever reason, there's a certain lean to headlines these days. In order to appeal to a certain populace or perhaps to produce a certain scandalous effect. Even when nothing could be even remotely offensive about a person's words or actions, a headline about those things and subsequent headlines that follow could snowball that thing into a gigantic mountainous scandal. What's an example of this? Well, Obama once used Dijon mustard. He also once wore a tan suit. Reading the headlines about these things, you'd think that he'd collected the world's entire population of puppies and baked them alive inside a melting down nuclear reactor. This growing situation was ultimately parodied by the anonymous fellow who runs the New York Times Pitchbot and began crafting fake headlines in the same style, often to super humorous effect. He would go on to enter one of the key phrases of the Trump years into the cultural lexicon by making fun of the insane number of headlines from the Times and others that blamed Democratic politicians for outcomes caused by Trump. Here's why that's bad news for Biden was a frequent ending to lots of the parodied headlines. As in this example from a 2023 post, the iPhone 15 will move away from the lightning connector. Here's why that's bad news for Biden. And who could forget the endless headlines inspired by conversations with real people out in the world? always, for some reason, sitting at diners in random uninhabited corners of the United States, all strangely conservative-leaning as well. Which again is another reason for the inspiration beyond why I feel like I need to step in here because of the obvious singular focus of this whole trend. But the appeal to the local style headlines were also not spared by the Pitchbot, and one of his versions read as follows. We wanted to understand MLK's true legacy, so we talked to 3 Vivek Ramaswamy supporters at a pizza ranch in Cedar Rapids. Headlines are seeming much more conservative or right-leaning to me in recent years, even if the content of the article or the segment is ultimately left-leaning or nuanced. I think the story of why this is happening can be parsed out in the data. A Pew Research Center survey from this year analyzed left and right-leaning readers' opinions and their level of trust in different media outlets. The mainstream media is universally mistrusted by conservatives, and that's outlets like ABC News, NBC News, CNN, and the New York Times. The distrust rate for Republicans is in the low 20% for those sources, while the trust rate for Democrats is in around the 50s to 60s percentages. The only mainstream media network that saw the opposite result was Fox News, 56% approval by Republicans surveyed versus just 19% by Democrats. And when Pew asked Republicans what sources they trusted the most to get their news and information, they cited things like Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, Newsmax, The Daily Wire, and Breitbart. All independent networks and individuals with zero accountability or any obligation to report the truth, and for the most part, people who have zero training in journalism. Studies have shown consistently that right-wing outlets are rife with misinformation and complete fabrications, and this study from 2 authors at the University of Amsterdam showed us that the majority of misinformation comes from one particular spot on the political spectrum, which is specifically right-wing populism. So why are headlines feeling more conservative lately? One reason might be that outlets that appeal to right-wing consumers are making a shit ton of money with fear-mongering and outrage bait headlines, and mainstream outlets are just following suit because they want that money too. Another reason we might point to is the both sides phenomenon of journalistic ethics. Both sides in a conversation about journalistic ethics means that a reporter should cover both sides of an issue fairly in order to solidify objectivity and eliminate bias. This both sides thing is a huge pet peeve of mine, and I have personally always had an issue with this particular ethical standard, because practicing it in the first place introduces bias into an outlet's reporting. First of all, there are not 2 sides to any issue. There are myriad multiples of sides. There are 360 degrees worth of perspectives and opinions. There aren't even any sides at all. Journalists who pick and choose who to call upon to platform so they can argue for their stance against whatever's being reported on are themselves creating a second side of an issue. Other journalists then pick up on the same position to parrot in their own coverage, and before long we have a solidified second side to something that was never even controversial to begin with. Every major issue in human society is now plagued by the both sides phenomenon. The desperate need to address and fix climate change has been hamstrung by both sides reporting, as has evolutionary science and vaccination science. Good Lord above, just look at all the insanity that was deliberately platformed and given a voice during the pandemic, and where that's brought us now. All sorts of things that are science-based or even totally random, non-controversial topics at all are made controversial by platforming crackpots and grifters that are handpicked by random media personalities with no training in a particular discipline, who are then brought into the public narrative to argue against something that's very important for us to fully understand and not to cloud the waters about. There are not 2 sides to things. There's what the evidence proves is real, and then there's every other random opinion under the sun. Those opinions are detrimental to real solutions if they gain enough traction. Supposedly ethical both sides headlines create a landscape where no one has a clear view of the truth anymore. It's far from ethical and completely irresponsible. My final thought about why headlines are becoming more conservative is that Trump won a second term, and at this point he's completely unconstrained. He's launched numerous lawsuits at media outlets because he just didn't like what they said about him in their coverage. He is an unhinged narcissist. And he's unfortunately also the sitting president of the United States. He's at the seat of an unquestioned power dynamic, and he's using that immense influence in morbidly petty ways that are completely unacceptable and unbecoming of any government official, let alone the highest position in the land. This is a man who's bullied and intimidated people and organizations throughout his entire life. But now, in his second term, he's surrounded by sycophants and yes men, and he's fired all the people who kept the insanity in check during his first term, and now he has the power to do real damage to big corporate media companies. So it seems like it's probably in their benefit to at least give lip service to the idea that they're bending the knee. Some of them, of course, have already done so very publicly. But headlines are actually a really crafty and strategic way for a news org to demonstrate that its coverage is becoming more Trump-friendly, and to signal loyalty to the regime. Because no one reads beyond the headline, least of all Trump himself, who's alleged by some who are in a place of authority to speak on the issue to be functionally illiterate. So there's actually no harm done if the body of the article then goes on to skewer him, because he's not going to see it. But the damage, unfortunately, does remain, since the vast majority of people also get their news solely from headlines. And this is where I got the idea to start fixing them. I shared some fixes privately with my friends and with my wife, who was immediately all like, "You should do a series of shorts on this, you're really good at this stuff." And I was all like, yeah, haha, yeah, I mean, that would be really cool and fun, but I don't think it's for me, and this is not really the thing I want to be doing right now. And then the more I thought about it, the more I figured she was probably right. And this could be a thing that really works out. And not just for me and my growing platform of like-minded people who want to do some good out in the world, but really for everyone, in the sense that we might finally begin to cut through the mounting piles of bullshit and get through to the actual truth of things once more. So please do join me on this new journey, and make sure to like this video, spread it around, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss when these new shorts come out. I'll see you in the headlines. The corrected, unabridged, less bullshitified headlines.